What's up, everyone? We are back for the second semester. We're going to start off with Islamic civilization, and I'm kind of backtracking here. I'm showing you Constantinople again. If you remember, this is the main city for the Byzantine Empire, the capital of the Eastern Roman Empire. What I'm showing you there is the Hagia Sophia. The reason I'm going back is because this becomes part of the Muslim world, and the Hagia Sophia is no longer a Byzantine domed church, but it becomes a Muslim mosque, which is their type of church. And this gets confused with the Dome of the Rock quite a bit by students. So I'm going to make sure that you see both and you can compare them. The Dome of the Rock is a lot smaller than the Hagia Sophia. So when you look at this, it's huge, and you'll see inside of it at the end of the second video. Okay, we're going to start off here showing some basic information and a few pictures that are very important. First, we're going to be talking about Islamic civilization and culture, not just the religion of Islam, but also the religion of Islam as well. Islam, the people who follow this religion are called Muslims, which is different because Christians, they follow Christianity, Jewish people follow Judaism. If you follow Buddhism, you're Buddhist, etc. So this is a little different. Muslims follow Islam. It's not exactly the same, so that confuses some students. Down at the bottom, you can see the Hagia Sophia. This is something that a lot of students get confused when they learn about the Dome of the Rock. So the Dome of the Rock, if you look between the two, the Dome of the Rock is smaller, but it also has a gold dome. Now, when I used to teach about World History 1, I used to tell the kids, hey, who lives in the Dome of the Rock? The Rock, obviously. He's the only guy on earth who can afford a gold dome. You know, Dwayne Johnson, who's all in the movies and everything. But reality is, what's inside is an actual rock. And we'll talk more about this later. But to the far right, that is the Kaaba in Mecca. Mecca is the holiest city for Muslims. And this is where they go on their pilgrimage or Hajj, which we'll talk about shortly. So one of the things I want to start with right off the bat is reminding you that Judaism is the root religion to Christianity and Islam. So for Jews, later there's this split where some Jews become Christian. Well, Islam, because it's located in the Middle East where many Jewish people are, they share some of the same beliefs. So this little chart that I created just shows you Judaism is the root religion. All three of these are monotheistic. All three of these accept Abraham and Moses as prophets. Now, Christianity, Jesus is their main prophet, which they believe is the Son of God. The New Testament is their holy text. Over on the other side with Islam, Muhammad is their main prophet, and the Quran or Quran is their holy text. So we've discussed Judaism and Christianity in great detail in the past videos. So now Islam, what's it all about? So we have first off what's called the revelations of Muhammad. An angel reveals the basis for the Islamic faith to Muhammad through dreams. Now, Muhammad's a merchant in Mecca. He sells things to people, but he can't read and write. So when he goes to this cave and he has these dreams, he comes back to Mecca and he finds people who can write these down for him, which is called dictation. And these revelations are documented in the Quran or Quran, the same word, different spellings. That's the holy text for Muslims. So we get to the word prophet. Muhammad is the main prophet of Islam. A prophet is someone that many believe can communicate with God. So Muhammad is the principal prophet for the Islamic faith. However, other prophets like Moses and Jesus are also accepted by Muslims. So Islam begins in the Arabian Peninsula, and in particular the city of Mecca, which I mentioned a moment ago. Muhammad and his followers were persecuted. Then they fled to a nearby city called Medina. They were accepted there. Now, after they get more followers, they return to Mecca and conquer the city. So Mecca and Medina are considered to be the holiest cities to Muslims. You can see the big gold stars there. This is something that's guaranteed going to show up on an SOL district-wide test. So again, Mecca and Medina, you need to know the location as well, which you're going to see here in just a second on the next slide. So How did Islam spread? First off, you need to understand it starts here on the Arabian Peninsula, which is highlighted in red. You can see there's two symbols, a black star, which represents the city of Mecca, and a black dot that represents the city of Medina. So the religion starts in Mecca, where Muhammad lives, and then after he and his followers are persecuted, they go to Medina and then eventually return to Mecca. Once again, they are the two most holy cities. Now you can see the map and see the other areas which you're familiar with because we've spent so much time on geography. So what you have to know is that Islam spreads eastward into Asia, but then it also goes westward all across the top of Africa into Spain. And we're going to be talking about later how they would have pushed further, but they're stopped by Christians. So this is kind of a conflict which ultimately leads to crusades later, which we'll talk about in another unit, which is pretty fun. But again, this is Islam from the beginning, just conquered, in essence, the Arabian Peninsula. But over time, they spread eastward and westward. One of the things you need to understand that's complicated for some is Muhammad is the founder of Islam. And while he is alive, there is no conflict. Everyone understands that he's the leader. He's the one who basically starts this religion. But once he dies, there becomes conflict within Islam itself as they do not know who should be the legitimate leader. And we'll talk more about that. Okay, so this is the key beliefs, traditions, and practices of Islam. First off, monotheistic. We already talked about that. The word Allah, it's not a different God. It's just the Arabic word for God. Muslims speak Arabic. So Allah means God, the same God that Christians and Jews also worship. Then we have the Quran or Quran. That is the word of God. So Muslims believe that this book has the actual words of God. And remember, Muhammad dictated this to others who could read and write where he couldn't, but he had these dreams, so he wanted them documented. Then we have the 5 pillars of Islam. That's going to be on a graphic coming up. We'll talk about them individually. But the 5 pillars are the key things that all Muslims must do. And then finally, Muslims accept earlier prophets like Moses and Jesus. So for the 5 pillars, again, these are the 5 key beliefs for all Muslims. The first is the profession of faith. There is no God but God, and Muhammad is his prophet or the messenger of God. So number 2, they have to pray 5 times a day facing Mecca. Many of you have probably seen pictures where they use these small rugs. They're down on their knees and they pray. Number 3, they give alms to the poor. Now, alms means charity. And here's the thing. What if you're already poor? So that's why it's not just money. They don't just give money to the poor. Charity could mean help. For example, if you don't have a lot of money, you could actually help your next door neighbor carry their groceries in the house, etc. Number 4, during the holy month of Ramadan, they fast, which means from the time the sun comes up to the time the sun goes down, they do not eat or drink. And last, once in your life, if it's possible for you to do it, you're supposed to take a Hajj to Mecca. In the second video, I'm going to show you the Kaaba in Mecca so you can get an idea what that looks like. So, the historical turning points. First, and this is a really complicated concept that gives students trouble, and it's understandable. The death of Ali and the Sunni-Shia split. So first off, Ali is Muhammad's son-in-law. His daughter marries him. He doesn't have his own son by blood. So when Muhammad dies, there is a division. One group of people, the majority, they believe that they would rather vote for someone. They would rather pick a political leader, not a religious leader. However, the Shia Muslims or Shiites, they believe that the leader must go through Muhammad's family. So therefore, Ali is the true leader. So Muhammad never designated who should succeed him, and he didn't have a son. So that's where the problem is. Because the majority of Muslims wanted to elect someone to be their political leader rather than a straight-up religious leader, Ali did not become the first caliph or leader after Muhammad. The second and third caliphs were both assassinated. And then when Ali finally was made the leader of Islam or the caliph, he was also assassinated, and this causes this split between the two. The problem is the majority of Muslims are Sunni Muslims, roughly 85%. The Shia Muslims are the minority, but even today there's bad blood between them because of the assassination of Ali. So when you see the death of Ali, that's what causes this division. It's something that has still lasted through the centuries. So next we have another historical turning point. We have the Muslim conquest of Jerusalem and Damascus. Now Jerusalem is in the Middle East, and it's one of the holiest cities in terms of for Christians, Muslims, and Jewish people. And we're going to see a little bit of that in a few minutes in the next video. And that's where the Dome of the Rock is located, the Temple Mount, and so on. Today, Jerusalem is divided into 4 quarters with the 3 religions plus the Armenian quarter. And it's a very tense area to be. So again, the Muslims conquered these cities, and later, as I briefly mentioned before, we're going to be talking about the Crusades, where Christians and Muslims are fighting over control of Jerusalem, or the Holy Land. So next we have the Islamic capital at Mecca is moved by the Abbasid dynasty to Baghdad. Now why did they move it? Because of trade routes, to be honest. Mecca is more southern on the Arabian Peninsula, and it's harder to get to, so trade routes don't necessarily go directly through Mecca. But Baghdad is much more to the north, above the actual Arabian Peninsula, and part of what was the old Silk Roads. So again, this is much easier for trade, so that's where they make the capital. So finally for this video, the Muslims are pushing up into France. They've basically moved through Spain, and as they get to France, they come across Charlemagne's grandfather. You're going to learn about Charlemagne next unit. Charlemagne is this first Holy Roman Emperor, and we'll talk a lot about him, but his grandfather is called Charles the Hammer Martel, and they are Christians, and when the Muslims come in to try to take over in France, the Christians fight them and push them back. So this is very important because you can see where the Muslim culture remains today and where it doesn't, because up in Northern Europe, that is basically Christian. But then as you go through Spain, there are Moors, a large Muslim influence. And then not only that, through Africa, you have a large Muslim influence today as well. All right, so I'm going to leave you with this before we get to video number 2 for Islamic culture. I talked about earlier when you have to make a Hajj or a pilgrimage to Mecca. This is Mecca, and this is the Great Mosque. And if you see that small little black building, that's called the Kaaba. Muslims believe that this building was actually made by Abraham himself. And there's no proof of that, but that's what their belief is. Now, also, there is a small rock in one of the corners of the building, which you don't see. This is from Flight Simulator. It's not quite as accurate as, a real picture. But this rock was believed to have been sent by God. Well, over the years, when we have better technology, it turns out that it's actually a piece of a meteor. So one way or another, it did come from space, which could be interpreted as from God. So that's pretty interesting. But again, this is part of the 5 pillars, a pilgrimage to Mecca, and thousands upon thousands of people would visit every year during Ramadan in particular, but throughout the year as well.